everyone, it's Mark here from Smart ASMR. Today I'm going to be doing my NFL Week 10 recap video, and I'll also be making my picks for Week 11. So we'll get started with the first game. The first game was the Thursday night game. It was between the Colts and Titans, and the Indianapolis Colts ended up defeating the Tennessee Titans 34-17. The Colts are now 6-3 on the season, and the Titans are 6-3 as well. This is pretty big because now the Colts control the AFC South, but both of these teams play each other again in Week 12, so that's already coming up. For stats for the Colts, Philip Rivers was 29 of 39 for 308 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. Nyheim Hines had 12 carries for 70 yards and a touchdown, and 5 catches for 45 yards and a touchdown. I was glad he played well because I have him on my fantasy team, and my running backs have really been hurting on my team lately. I have Chris Carson, who's been out. I have Zeke, who he hasn't been performing as well as he should have lately. So it's good to have him as a free agent pickup. Also in this game, Jacoby Brissett had a 2-yard touchdown run off a QB sneak, so that was really cool to see. You could tell the team really loved it. Michael Pittman Jr. had 7 catches for 101 yards, and he also had a 21-yard carry. This is the second week in a row that he's the Colts' leading receiver. He's still looking for his first NFL touchdown, but he's really been playing big for them lately. For the Titans, Ryan Tannehill went 15 of 27 for 147 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. Derrick Henry had 19 carries for 103 yards, so he got his yardage. Jonnu Smith had a 1-yard touchdown run. Corey Davis had 5 catches for 67 yards. Donta Foreman had a 5-yard touchdown catch, which was the first touchdown of the game. So in this game, the Titans were actually up 17-13 at halftime, but the Colts scored 21 unanswered points in the second half. The momentum swing happened in the third quarter. The Titans had the punt, and their newly acquired punter, Trevor Daniel, ended up netting only 17 yards on his punt. It hit off the side of his foot. I believe their punter's dealing with an injury right now, so they had to pick up a new one. And this gave the Colts good field position, which they took advantage of for a touchdown. And the possession after that, the Titans had to punt again, and this time their punt was blocked. It was blocked by E.J. Speed, and it was returned for a touchdown by T.J. Carey for a 6-yard return. So that shows how important special teams can be for a game, and it made a huge difference for the Titans and allowed the Colts to get ahead in this game and get the momentum for the rest of the game. Next up, we'll be talking about the Texans at the Browns. The Browns ended up defeating the Texans 10-7. The Texans fall to 2-7 on the season, whereas the Browns are now 6-3. This is the first time the Browns are 6-3 since 2014. This game actually started off pretty crazy. There was a weather delay with high winds and hail game started 35 minutes late. This was a very low-scoring affair. The Browns were up 3-0 at the half, and at the end of the third quarter, the Texans did go for it on fourth down at the 2-yard line in the second quarter. This was the 2-yard line of the Browns, and they didn't pick it up, so they could have kicked a field goal, but instead they went for it and didn't convert. On this play, Myles Garrett ended up stopping Deshaun Watson on a QB run. The Texans could have also ended up kicking a field goal in the second quarter when they lined up to kick one, and they ended up doing a fake field goal and punting it. And also the Texans kicker, Fairbairn, ended up missing a 46-yard field goal attempt in the third quarter. So it wasn't really the Texans' day when they got to the Browns side of the field. For the Texans stats, Deshaun Watson was 20 of 30 for 163 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions, and he had 8 carries for 36 yards. Duke Johnson had 14 carries for 54 yards. He was playing in place of an injured David Johnson, who's on the injury reserve right now. Randall Cobb had 3 catches for 41 yards. Farrell Brown had 2 catches for 21 yards and a touchdown. He ended up scoring for the Texans finally at the 4:59 mark left in the fourth quarter, and after that the Browns ended up running out the clock to prevent the Texans from getting the ball back. Nick Chubb had a 59-yard rush. He could have gotten the end zone, but he decided to go out of bounds so they could kneel and end the game. A lot of fantasy owners weren't happy about that, but they still ended up getting the win. And it was a little confusing to see him go out of bounds because the Browns would have been up by 10, and there would have been nearly no way the Texans would be able to win the game if he would have scored that touchdown. But it shows how selfless he is and how much he wants the team to succeed over himself. For the Browns stats, Baker Mayfield was 12 of 20 for 132 yards. He had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Nick Chubb had 19 carries for 126 yards and a touchdown. Kareem Hunt had 19 carries for 104 yards. So they're a really good 1-2 punch for the Browns. They're both over 100 yards on the day, which is amazing. Rashard Higgins had 3 catches for 48 yards. Now I'll be talking about the Washington football team at the Detroit Lions. The Lions ended up defeating Washington 30-27. Washington's now 2-7, whereas the Lions are now 4-5. The Lions got off to a good start in this game. They were up 17-3 at halftime and had a 24-3 lead in the third quarter. And then Washington came and scored 3 touchdowns. And they tied the game with 6:09 left in the fourth quarter. Then both teams traded field goals after that. And the Lions drove down the field with only 16 seconds left. Then they got a big call on a 15-yard roughing the passer penalty, which set them up even closer, and they ended up getting to attempt a 59-yard field goal. And Matt Prater made the field goal to end the game. He was 3 for 3 on field goals. And the Lions have the first win of the season at home. It was cool to watch the Lions get a chance for a field goal because usually with 12 seconds you don't see a team getting within field goal range after getting the kickoff. That's just not a lot of time at all. For the stats for Washington, Alex Smith had a really good game. 38 for 55 for 390 yards. That's a career high in passing yards for him. He had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. He had 8 different players make catches for him in the game. Antonio Gibson had 13 carries for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. J.D. McKissick had 8 carries for 6 yards and a touchdown. Terry McLaurin had 7 catches for 95 yards and 1 carry for 27 yards, and he also lost a fumble in the game. Logan Thomas had 4 catches for 66 yards. Isaiah Wright had 6 catches for 59 yards. For the Lions, Matt Stafford went 24 for 33 for 276 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. DeAndre Swift had 16 carries for 81 yards. He played really well. He also had 5 catches for 68 yards and a touchdown. Marvin Jones Jr. had 8 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown. And Marvin Hall had 2 catches for 61 yards and a touchdown, which was the first touchdown of the game. Marvin Hall is a really good deep threat receiver for the Lions. Next up, we'll be talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Carolina Panthers. The Buccaneers ended up defeating the Panthers 46-23. The Buccaneers are now 7-3 on the season, whereas the Panthers fell to 3-7. This was a very close game at the end of the first half. It was tied 17-17 at that point, and then the Buccaneers really took control in the second half of the game. For the Buccaneers stats, Tom Brady was 28 of 39 for 341 yards. He had 3 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. And he also had a touchdown run off a QB sneak. Ronald Jones had 23 carries for 192 yards and a touchdown. He did lose a fumble in the first quarter, but he had a 98-yard touchdown run in this game, which is the longest Buccaneers offensive play that they've ever had in franchise history. Chris Godwin had 6 catches for 92 yards. Mike Evans had 6 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown. Antonio Brown had 7 catches for 69 yards. Rob Gronkowski had 2 catches for 51 yards and a touchdown. Cameron Brate had 3 catches for 31 yards and a touchdown. On defense, Jason Pierre-Paul had 1 sack along with an interception. And their field goal kicker, Ryan Suckup, went 4 for 4 on field goals. He did have an extra point blocked, but besides that, he was perfect on his kicking. For the Panthers stats, Teddy Bridgewater was 18 of 24 for 136 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. He also had 3 carries for 16 yards and a touchdown. He ended up injuring his knee late in the fourth quarter, which was determined to be an MCL sprain. His status for this week is still uncertain, and PJ Walker took over for the rest of the game for him. Mike Davis had 7 carries for 32 yards. He's playing for the injured Christian McCaffrey, who has a shoulder injury right now. DJ Moore had 4 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown. And Colin Thompson had a 7-yard touchdown catch. That was his first NFL catch. He had a lone NFL touchdown too. And that was the first score of the game. So this was a good game to get the Buccaneers back on track, and in the mention of being one of the best NFC teams. Up next, we'll be talking about the Philadelphia Eagles at the New York Giants. The Giants ended up defeating the Eagles 27-17. which makes the NFC East even more interesting. Any team has a shot to win that division, and now it's just getting absolutely insane. The leader of the division is still technically the Eagles, but they have the same amount of wins as the Giants now. The Eagles are 3-5-1, and the Giants are 3-7 now. In this game, the Giants were up 14-3 at the half, and they never lost the lead all game. This is the first time since 2016 that the Giants got a win in the division against a team other than Washington. For the Eagles stats, Carson Wentz went 21 of 37 for 208 yards and had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Miles Sanders had 15 carries for 85 yards, and he also ran in a 2-point conversion. Boston Scott had 3 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown. His touchdown run was 56 yards long, and it was in the third quarter. Corey Clement had a 5-yard touchdown run. Richard Rodgers had 4 catches for 60 yards. And Jalen Reagor had 4 catches for 47 yards. For the Giants stats, Daniel Jones went 21 of 28 for 244 yards. He had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions passing. He also had 9 carries for 64 yards and a touchdown. This was a 34-yard touchdown run. He didn't fall down this time, so that was cool to see. Wayne Gallman had 18 carries for 53 yards and 2 touchdowns. Darius Slayton had 5 catches for 93 yards, and Sterling Shepard had 6 catches for 47 yards. Now we'll be talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Green Bay Packers. The Packers ended up defeating the Jaguars in a close game by the final score of 24-20. The Jaguars are now 1-8, and the Packers improved to 7-2 on the season. The Packers were up 17-10 at halftime in this game. Then in the fourth quarter, they were trailing 20-17. Aaron Rodgers then found Davante Adams for a 6-yard touchdown at the 9:03 mark left in the fourth quarter and took the lead, and with that, the score stayed the same for the rest of the game, and the Packers got the victory. The weather was really windy in this game, so it may have affected the throws for both quarterbacks. For the Jaguars stats, Jake Luton was 18 of 35 for 169 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 1 interception. James Robinson had 23 carries for 109 yards. DJ Chark had 4 catches for 56 yards. Keelan Cole was by far the best Jaguars player of the game. He had 5 catches for 47 yards and a touchdown. And he also had a punt return touchdown of 91 yards. For the Packers stats, Aaron Rodgers went 24 of 34 for 325 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. He also had a 5-yard touchdown run, which was his first rushing touchdown of the season. Aaron Jones had 13 carries for 46 yards and 5 catches for 49 yards. Marquez Valdes-Scantling really stepped up today and had 4 catches for 149 yards and a touchdown. His touchdown was a 78-yard touchdown. Davante Adams had 8 catches for 66 yards and a touchdown, and he also had a fumble lost. But this was a close win for the Packers, which sometimes these close wins really show who you are as a team and can be a lot better in the long run for your team when they're they're facing a similar game like that in the future. It shows that you can get through a close game and battle through the adversity. Up next is by far the best game of the week. It's the Buffalo Bills at the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals ended up defeating the Bills on a thriller, 32-30. The Bills are now 7-3, and the Cardinals are 6-3. In this game, the Bills were up 16-9 at halftime, and they had a 23-9 lead in the third quarter. The Cardinals ended up putting themselves up 26-23 by the end of the third quarter by getting 2 touchdowns and a field goal. At the end of the game, with 34 seconds left, Stephon Diggs ended up getting a 21-yard touchdown catch, which looked to be the game winner for the Bills, but then the Cardinals got the ball back with 32 seconds left and drove 75 yards. Thanks to a big play by Kyler Murray to DeAndre Hopkins. They call it the Hail Murray. He threw a 43-yard pass, running to his left, avoiding pressure, and DeAndre Hopkins was in triple coverage and managed to snare the ball out of the air at its high point and had a miraculous catch and completed the comeback for the Cardinals. It was insane. I actually went to take a shower because I had to get ready for work, and I saw Stephon Diggs got the touchdown right before I left. So I thought the game was over, and then I came back and I asked my roommate, I was like, so the Bills won, right? He was like, no, the Cardinals won. I was like, no way, you gotta be joking. He was like, yeah, DeAndre Hopkins pulled down the ball on a Hail Mary. And I watched the highlight and I was in disbelief. I actually watched it like 5 times in a row. It was so cool to watch. For the Bills' stats, Josh Allen went 32 for 49 for 284 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And he also had 7 carries for 38 yards. Isaiah McKenzie was part of a trick play and had a 12-yard touchdown pass to Josh Allen. Josh Allen handed the ball to Isaiah McKenzie on a reverse and then went to the left sideline and caught the ball there and ran it in for a touchdown. So that was cool to see. Zach Moss had 7 carries for 20 yards. Cole Beasley had 11 catches for 109 yards and a touchdown. He had a pretty cool one-handed catch in the game. Stephon Diggs had 10 catches for 93 yards and a touchdown. John Brown had 6 catches for 72 yards. And Tyler Bass went 3 for 3 on field goals. All of his field goals were new career longs for him, and they're all in the first half. His first kick went 54 yards, his second went 55 yards, and his last one went 58 yards. So he was really clutch in the game. For the Cardinals stats, Kyler Murray went 22 of 32 for 245 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 1 interception, and he had 11 carries for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was really effective on the ground today. Kenyon Drake had 16 carries for 100 yards, and he also lost a fumble in the game. Chase Edmonds had 8 carries for 56 yards. DeAndre Hopkins had 7 catches for 127 yards and a touchdown. For the defense, Drake Kirkpatrick and Patrick Peterson both had interceptions. And the Cardinals field goal kicker, Zane Gonzalez, went 4 for 4 on his field goals for the day. The NFC West has gotten more entertaining to watch now that the Cardinals won. The Cardinals, Rams, and Seahawks are now 6-3, And the Cardinals and Seahawks play each other on Thursday, so that'll be a really fun game to watch. Now I'll be talking about the Los Angeles Chargers at the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins ended up defeating the Chargers 29-21. The Chargers are now 2-7 on the season, and the Dolphins improved to 6-3. The Dolphins seem to always have a big special teams or defensive play every game, and they did again in this game. The Dolphins blocked a punt after the Chargers' first possession, and it was blocked by Andrew Van Ginkel and recovered by Jamal Perry. In this game, the Dolphins were up 17-7 at the half and held the lead for the entire game. For the Chargers stats, Justin Herbert went 20 of 32 for 187 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception, and he had 4 carries for 10 yards and a touchdown. Kalen Ballage had 18 carries for 68 yards and 5 catches for 34 yards. Keenan Allen had 3 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown. And Hunter Henry had 4 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. For the Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa was 15 of 25 for 169 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Salvon Ahmed had 21 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. Jakeem Grant had 4 catches for 43 yards and a touchdown. Mike Gesicki had 2 catches for 40 yards. Durham Smythe had 2 catches for 9 yards and a touchdown. Jason Sanders, their field goal kicker, went 3 for 4, and he had a long of 50 yards. For their defense, Xavier Howard had an interception in the fourth quarter for them when they were up 20-14, which really prevented any sort of potential comeback from the Chargers. Up next, I'll be talking about the Denver Broncos at the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders ended up defeating the Broncos 37-12. The Broncos are now 3-6 on this season, whereas the Raiders improved to 6-3. This was a close game at the half, where the Raiders were leading 10-6. And in this game, the Broncos had 5 turnovers, which really doesn't help your chances to win at all. For the Broncos, Drew Lock was 23 of 47 for 257 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 4 interceptions, so not a good game for him. He ended up having an injury through the game though, and it's gotten worse. He has severe straining and bruising near his ribs, so maybe that affected his throws today, and he tried to tough it out, so his status is in question. I believe it's in doubt that he'll play this upcoming week. Drew Lock now has 7 touchdowns and 10 interceptions on the season. Melvin Gordon had 11 carries for 46 yards. Jerry Jeudy had 4 catches for 68 yards. Tim Patrick had 4 catches for 61 yards. KJ Hamler had 4 catches for 50 yards. And Deshaun Hamilton had 4 catches for 33 yards and a touchdown, but he also lost a fumble in the game. For the Raiders, Derek Carr was 16 of 25 for 154 yards. He had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Josh Jacobs had 21 carries for 112 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had a really good game. Devontae Booker also had a good game and had 16 carries for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns against his former team. Darren Waller had 3 catches for 37 yards. He was the leading receiver for the Raiders. For their defense, Nick Kwiatkowski had a one-hand interception at the end of the game. Carl Nassib had an interception, and Jeff Heath had 2 interceptions, both in the first half. Next game is the Seattle Seahawks at the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams ended up defeating the Seahawks 23-16 to get a division win, which is very important for them. The Seahawks have now lost 2 straight and fall to 6-3, whereas the Rams are now 6-3 as well. In this game, the Rams are up 17-13 at the half after Jason Myers kicked a 61-yard field goal for the Seahawks as time expired. This was a franchise record for the Seahawks. At the end of the game, the Seahawks are down 23-13, so they kicked a field goal to make it 23-16 with 25 seconds left to play, and they tried an onside kick and didn't get it. This gave the Rams the victory. For the Seahawks stats, Russell Wilson was 22 of 37 for 248 yards. He had 0 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and he also had a lost fumble on a snap. He also carried the ball 8 times for 60 yards. Alex Collins ran the ball 11 times for 43 yards and had a touchdown. He was a player who started his career out in Seattle, then went with Baltimore for 2 years, and then he was out of the league last year. Then he was signed on the practice squad on November 4th by the Seahawks and elevated to the game day roster this game and had a pretty admirable game. Tyler Lockett had 5 catches for 66 yards. DK Metcalf was only held to 2 catches for 28 yards. Jalen Ramsey did a really good job covering him in the game. I really like the Rams defense and how they're playing this year. For the defense, Jamal Adams had 2 sacks, one that was a fumble force, and Poona Ford had 1 sack. For the Rams stats, Jared Goff was 27 of 37 for 302 yards. He had 0 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Cam Akers had 10 carries for 38 yards. Malcolm Brown had 6 carries for 33 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Darrell Henderson had 7 carries for 28 yards and a touchdown. Josh Reynolds had 8 catches for 94 yards. Tyler Higbee had 3 catches for 60 yards. Cooper Kupp had 5 catches for 50 yards. For their defense, Leonard Floyd had 3 sacks and a fumble recovery. Terrell Hall had 2 sacks, and Michael Brockers had 1 sack. Darius Williams had 2 interceptions. Now we'll be talking about the Cincinnati Bengals at the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers ended up winning big against the Bengals, 36-10. The Bengals are now 2-6-1, whereas the Steelers improved to 9-0. They're the only undefeated team left in the NFL right now. This game wasn't even close at the half either. The Steelers are up 22-7. The Steelers kicker Chris Boswell has actually never missed a field goal against Cincinnati, and he went 3 for 3 on the day. For the Bengals stats, Joe Burrow was 21 of 40 for 213 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. Samaje Perine had 7 carries for 48 yards. Sean Williams had a 39-yard run on a fake punt for the Bengals. T. Higgins had 7 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown, and he also lost a fumble. For the Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger went 27 of 46 for 333 yards. He had 4 touchdowns and 0 interceptions, so he played another amazing game. James Conner had 13 carries for 36 yards. Deontay Johnson had 6 catches for 116 yards and a touchdown. Juju Smith-Schuster had 9 catches for 77 yards and a touchdown. Chase Claypool, their very talented rookie, had 4 catches for 56 yards and 2 touchdowns. They were both touchdowns in the second half. For their defense, TJ Watt had 2 sacks, Robert Spillane had 1 sack, and Bud Dupree had a sack as well. Next up is the San Francisco 49ers at the New Orleans Saints. The Saints ended up defeating the Niners 27-13. The 49ers are now 4-6 on the season, and they're very injury-ridden. And the Saints are now 7-2. 49ers are actually up early in this game. They're up 10-0. They recovered a muff punt from Deontay Harris's fumble after he tried doing a fair catch. And then Deontay Harris did make up for that later with a 75-yard kick return to set them up at the 25-yard line. There were actually 2 more errors on punt returns, both by the 49ers. Somebody had touched the ball on a punt return for the Niners, which gave the ball back to the Saints, and they were able to tie the game 10-10 with a Kamara 2-yard touchdown run. Then the Saints were up 17-10 at the half after an Alvin Kamara 3-yard touchdown catch. And then the last punt return error was by Richie James. He muffed the punt return in the 4th quarter, which resulted in a Saints touchdown, which was the 3rd for Kamara of the day from a 1-yard touchdown run. For the 49ers stats, Nick Mullins went 24 for 38 for 247 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. Jerick McKinnon had 18 carries for 33 yards. Brandon Ayuk was back today and had 7 catches for 75 yards and a touchdown. The 30-year-old Jordan Reed had 5 catches for 62 yards. For the Saints, Drew Brees was 8 of 13 for 76 yards and had a touchdown. He ended up leaving with fractured ribs and a collapsed lung. He fractured 2 of his ribs this week and 3 on the right side last week versus the Buccaneers, so they didn't even notice those ones until now. So Jameis Winston came in for him in the second half and went 6 for 10 for 63 yards. Drew Brees' status is uncertain for future games right now, but it's said that he's not going to miss a lot of time potentially. Latavius Murray had 9 carries for 57 yards. Taysom Hill had 8 carries for 45 yards and lost a fumble. Alvin Kamara had 8 carries for 15 yards and 2 touchdowns, and 7 catches for 83 yards and a touchdown. So he had a great 3-touchdown game. Malcolm Jenkins and Patrick Robinson both had interceptions. Patrick Robinson's was with the last 2:25 left in the game, and it was in the end zone when the 49ers were close to scoring. Up next, we'll be talking about the Baltimore Ravens at the New England Patriots. This was the Sunday night game. The Patriots ended up upsetting the Ravens 23-17. The Ravens are now 6-3 on the season, and the Patriots are 4-5. This was a very rainy night, which only got worse throughout the night. By the end of the game, it was absolutely downpouring. There was no points scored in the 4th quarter in this game. The rain may have affected the Ravens because they had 2 bad snaps in the game. One was in the 4th quarter for a loss of 16 yards, which really pushed them back. For the Ravens stats, Lamar Jackson went 24-34 for 200 149 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception, and he had 11 carries for 55 yards. Gus Edwards had 7 carries for 42 yards. Willie Snead had 5 catches for 64 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was by far their biggest threat on the day. And Mark Andrews had 7 catches for 61 yards. For the Patriots, Cam Newton went 13 of 17 for 118 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 0 interceptions. He also had 11 carries for 21 yards and a touchdown. Jacoby Myers, the former high school quarterback, threw a 24-yard touchdown pass to Rex Burkhead. It was a trick play where Cam Newton tossed it to Jacoby Myers, who then threw it to Rex Burkhead, and that gave them a 14-10 lead at the half. Jacoby Myers also had 5 catches for 59 yards. He's really been showing a lot of talent lately for the Patriots. Damian Harris had 22 carries for 121 yards. He had another really good game today. Rex Burkhead had 4 catches for 35 yards and 2 touchdowns. And for the defense, J.C. Jackson intercepted Lamar Jackson before the half. Now we'll talk about the last game, the Monday night game between the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. The Vikings ended up defeating the Bears 19-13. The Vikings have now won 3 in a row and are 4-5, where the Bears are heading in an opposite direction. They've lost 4 in a row now, and now they are 5-5. The game started out with 2 turnovers. Kyle Rudolph had a fumble, which was recovered by the Bears. And then Harrison Smith intercepted Nick Foles. The Vikings were able to get a touchdown to Adam Thielen then after that. Before the half, Khalil Mack had an interception on Kirk Cousins. He caught a bobbled pass by Adam Thielen and returned it down the sideline a bit before he was knocked out of bounds. That turnover led to a Bears field goal and made the game 7-6 at halftime, with the Vikings leading. To begin the second half, Cordero Patterson returned the kickoff return 104 yards for a touchdown. He now has 8 kickoff return touchdowns, which ties the NFL record with Josh Cribbs and Leon Washington. Then another turnover that happened in the third quarter was a Dwayne Harris muffed punt return, which he plays for the Bears, and he gave it back to the Vikings, which they're able to get a field goal off of. After the Cordero Patterson return touchdown, the Bears didn't score anymore for the rest of the night, and the Vikings scored 12 unanswered points, which was 2 field goals and a touchdown, in which the extra point was missed. But the Vikings were able to hang on to the victory. For the Vikings stats, Kirk Cousins went 25 of 36 for 292 yards. He had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Dalvin Cook had 30 carries for 96 yards. Justin Jefferson had 8 catches for 135 yards. Kyle Rudolph had 4 catches for 63 yards and a fumble. Adam Thielen had 4 catches for 43 yards and 2 touchdowns. For the Bears, the offense was very limited. Nick Foles went 15 of 26 for 106 yards. He had 0 touchdowns and 1 interception. He ended up getting injured on the last series of the game. He was seeing pressure all night, and this time, as he was trying to throw the ball to avoid a sack, he got tackled and landed on his back. And it looked like a really really serious injury because he was carted off the field, but it was found out that Nick Foles had a strain and bruise in the hip and glute area, so he should be alright in the long term and won't have to go on injury reserve. But the Bears are on bye week this week, so we'll see who the quarterback will be after the bye when they play the Packers. Cordero Patterson had 12 carries for 30 yards, 2 catches for 19 yards, and that 104-yard kickoff return touchdown I was talking about earlier. This was all against the former team who drafted him. And Allen Robinson had 6 catches for 43 yards. Alright, so now we're going to be doing my Week 11 picks. For the first game, which is Thursday night, we have the Cardinals at the Seahawks. I'm going to go with the Cardinals in this game because they seem to be trending upward, whereas the Seahawks seem to be trending downward. The Cardinals have beaten the Seahawks once already, so I'll just go with them this time, although I'm sure it'll be a really close game. The 9-0 Steelers at the 1-8 Jaguars. I'm going with the Steelers in this game. They're the most balanced NFL team in my opinion, so I think they'll win pretty easily. The 4-5 Lions at the 3-7 Panthers. I'm not sure what the status of Teddy Bridgewater is going to be for this week, so I'm going to go with the Lions in this game. I think the Lions have a lot of offensive talent. So do the Panthers, but the Panthers might still be missing Christian McCaffrey as well. And the Lions overall are a little bit healthier than the Panthers, so that's why I like the Lions in this game. The 4-5 Patriots at the 2-7 Texans. The Patriots have won 2 straight, so I'm going to pick them to win their 3rd straight now. They're starting to pick things up again. The 6-3 Titans at the 6-3 Ravens. This should be a really good game to watch. I'm going with the Ravens in this one. The Titans have looked off, and the Ravens have looked off as well in past weeks. But I think the Ravens will pull through this week. The 3-5-1 Eagles at the 6-3 Browns. I'm gonna go with the Browns. They have too much offensive talent, especially with that 1-2 punch running back committee they have with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. And the Eagles just look lost this season. So that's why I'm going with Cleveland. The 3-6 Falcons at the 7-2 Saints. I'm going with the Saints in this one, even though Drew Brees' status is up for question. I like their defense and how well they're coached, and whoever they put in at quarterback, I think, will do enough to help them get the win. They have Alvin Kamara, who can help them get through, and they've got plenty of talent on their receiver side of things. The 2-6-1 Bengals at 2-7 Washington. I'm gonna go with the Bengals in this game. I like what the Bengals offenses look like this year. The 0-9 Jets at the 2-7 Chargers. As much as I'd like to pick the Jets to get out of their unperfect season, I'm gonna go with the Chargers. I don't think Sam Darnold's playing in this game, so I just like what Justin Herbert's doing as a rookie, and I think he'll lead them to their 3rd victory Texans at the 3-6 Broncos. I'm gonna go with the Dolphins. They've been playing really well as of late. I think the Broncos are looking kind of lost right now, and they might not have Drew Lock in this game. So I'm going with the hot team right now. The 2-7 Cowboys at the 4-5 Vikings. I'm going with the Vikings to win 4 in a row. I don't trust the Cowboys to get it done, given their quarterback situation. So I think the Vikings have a lot of offensive talent, and Dalvin Cook should run them down throughout the quarters, and the Vikings should get the win. The 7-2 Packers at the 6-3 Colts. This was a tough game to choose from, but I ended up picking the Colts. The Packers defense hasn't been playing well this year, and I think the Colts offense will get enough done to win the game. It just depends on how much the Packers can score. The Colts defense is really good, so I guess we'll have to see what happens. The 8-1 Chiefs at the 6-3 Raiders. The Raiders already have beaten the Chiefs once, but this time I'm going with the Chiefs. I think they'll avenge their loss. Last game, the Chiefs kind of just fell off the grid after the first half. This time I think they'll finish all 4 quarters and get it done. The 6-3 Rams at the 7-3 Buccaneers. This is going to be a really good game with a good defense versus a good offense, and vice versa even. But I'm going to go with the Buccaneers in this game. I think they'll get enough done to win the game.